You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.
Welcome to the Social Workers Radio Talk Show. I'm your co-host, Alyssa Lotmore. With the coronavirus the focus of much of what is in the news today, today's guest is well-versed in communication during a crisis and will speak to us about all of the messages we are getting from businesses, brands, and organizations, as well as what we can do to support local businesses during this time. Joe Bonilla, who has been on our show multiple times in the past, is the managing partner, senior media director, and co-founder of Relentless. Recognized as a leading communications professional based in the Northeast, major brands, companies, organizations, and public figures rely on Joe's counsel and insight in moving their message forward with impressive results. One of Joe's specialties is crisis communication and rapid response. So welcome, Joe.
Good to be back with you, Alyssa.
So this is a time of anxiety and fear for many. And let's just jump right in and start off with the first question. There are numerous emails that we have all been receiving from businesses, brands, and organizations about what they are doing to keep us safe during the coronavirus outbreak. What is the reason behind these messages, and will they begin to shift as we travel through this crisis situation?
Well, it's important for any brand or organization to assess the potential risk of any sort of crisis, whether it's COVID-19, it's a fire, it's some other sort of disaster, if you will. And it's important to affirm what's being done to mitigate that risk. Crisis communications, at the end of the day, is all about the mitigation of risk and how do you communicate that information to the public, to stakeholders, to decision makers, whoever the necessary audience needs to be. And you have to do it in a clear and concise way in order not to, promote, rumors and unfounded fears and things like that. I think in this particular situation, this is more of a macro crisis. And what that refers to is that, for any crisis or rapid response situation we handle for a client, it's generally for that particular client. It could be something where it affects a particular community, so there might be a few different folks involved in that. But this is something where it's a truly national and worldwide situation where every single brand, organization, any sort of entity has to kind of figure what is that response. And for every organization and brand, it's different. If you are a bar or a restaurant or some sort of public-facing establishment, one of the things that you need to do is be able to convey what are you doing to mitigate that risk. Is it, just talking about the sanitary precautions you're taking on behalf of your staff, on behalf of your customers? If you're a venue, what are you doing, in terms of mitigating that risk? A lot of venues that we're in contact with or we work with, they have concerts and events and other public gatherings, and per the recent executive order by Governor Cuomo, any gathering over 500 people right now is banned for the next 30 days as of March 13th. And for any venue that's smaller than that, and when I mean a venue, it can be any sort of place where the public can gather outside of a school, a public building, a medical institution, a retailer, particular retailer such as a supermarket, but anybody else is under this guidance. And one of the things that you need to communicate is, right now, let's say you have a restaurant or a bar that fits about 75 people. You need to reduce that down by half, and it's being done out of an abundance of caution. So when you communicate that out via social media, email marketing and messaging, other points of contact that you're able to have with your constituency that you reach out to, you need to be able to convey this in a calm and rational manner. And part of that is talking about those precautions, but also if there are events and initiatives that have been rescheduled or postponed or canceled, if they've been canceled because there's no other way to do it, then outright say they should be canceled. But if it's something that can be postponed, one of the most important things that we can do right now to at least show that there is a light at the end of this proverbial tunnel, at the end of this point, is to be able to figure out a time where it's going to be reasonable based upon perceptive and real risk when you can reschedule these sorts of events and gatherings. Of course, it's a very fluid time. I would continue to encourage you to look at public authorities in terms of, especially with the governor and the CDC and other entities, about what that response will be to really make that decision for your organization. And it's important for us to all communicate that out because we have a responsibility to each other in that sense.
Thank you for that, because my email has been flooded with all of those emails, and it's hard sometimes to process what the meaning is behind it. Is it just a way to feel secure? Is it a way to know more about the agency and what they're doing, to show that they care about our health? So thank you for breaking that down for us. Businesses are going to struggle during this time. It's a fact. And many of these are your clients as you work with small businesses. So what can we do to support local businesses while managing our own fears and anxiety about what's going on?
I think it depends on where you are. If you are in a particular location designated as currently a hotspot where there are more confirmed cases, you have to be able to take that risk. Now, if you're in an area that there's only so many confirmed cases, please take as many precautions as you can. But at this point, the economic impact cannot be understated. In particular, into like the respect with the Albany area where you record this show. One of the bigger events that take place in this area is the annual St. Patrick's Day celebrations. In addition to, Albany was one of the host cities for the NCAA tournament as part of March Madness, and both those events were, of course, canceled. And on top of consumer confidence has been devastated. So you have this 1, 2, 3 punch hit to small businesses and local enterprises that were really relying on that boost. Generally, for a lot of hospitality-based businesses, the first quarter is generally the weakest quarter. We get out of the holiday season, people are not going out to restaurants or bars or going to different shows and things like that. So the first quarter is already a tough time. And so it's important for all of us to support local enterprises because these are the people that you see every day. These are your neighbors. These are other folks in your community that really build upon that local fabric. That it's the reason why you've made these communities your home. And so you want to do what you can. Now, the few steps you can do. One, you can buy a gift card to one of these establishments if you don't feel like it's a right time for you, and then you can enjoy those establishments later on. Two, if you are still going out, please tip generously. For folks in the service industry, they get paid based upon performance. Based upon that's how hospitality works in this country. So you want to make sure you're tipping generously and you're appreciating what the staff, both front of house and back of house, and the owners are doing to keep things around. And third is just to be able to evangelize that as well. And are there ways that these establishments can also partner with community organizations? There are so many organizations and entities closed right now, from schools to colleges to whatever, beyond that. And a lot of times these are organizations and institutions that cater to at-risk individuals, whether they're on the lower end of the socioeconomic pole. And so are there ways for these organizations to partner, and how can you volunteer with that? So there's plenty of ways that we can support these local enterprises because they are the lifeblood of our communities. And the biggest fear is, of course, when is it okay? When do we resume this affirmation of normalcy? And that's where right now we are at what we like to call we're at peak panic. And what peak panic is it's right now. This is going to be the hot discussion for television and online and newspaper outlets for a bit now. But at some point, there will be a tide turn with any major crisis, with any sort of major issue, whether it's a biological issue that we have right now, it's some sort of major climate event such as a hurricane, a wildfire. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And at one point, it will be okay to begin to resume the normal way of things, albeit with some changes. But It's important to support local. It's important to support your neighbors, and find out from them what they need.
And how might this change things? We talk about, it might be a new normal, but with so many things now, conferences canceled, they're now doing digital, people are working from home more, there's students doing more online options. Will we go back to, it's hard to predict, but will we go back to how it was, or will people say, hey, that worked for us. It worked with having a reduced staff or not going to conferences and doing digital conferences. Will this change the way we look at business and the way we interact with each other, since we're being forced to do it so abruptly? But will this become part of the new normal?
I think for no doubt there will be some permanent changes that come out of this. One thing you're seeing is now the introduction of these virtual mixers, and also a lot of conference software, conference call software such as Zoom and other things like Skype are really seeing a lot of heavy usage right now. And so for each organization, you have to assess that. Is it worthwhile, after going through this situation, maybe you do just look at a virtual conference in that way. I think every organization needs to assess that, because for some, that human interaction is going to elicit potentially a better return versus a virtual interaction. And it really depends on what it is for each organization. But no doubt there will be some changes, and there will be ripple effects from that as well, where a lot of your main conference locations, a San Francisco in the Bay Area, New Orleans, Miami, Chicago, and Washington, D.C., and New York, and Boston, these places where it's a hotbed for conferences, you're going to see an economic impact in each of these communities, which then spills into restaurants and bars and retailers in these communities that bank on these business tourists to come in. So it's certainly something to look at, but I think for every organization, I think you need to assess it, based upon what it is. I think for some that are more hands-on, I think this will be an experiment. And if you see ultimately, we looked at this and it's really not the best thing for our organization, then you'll make that decision. But I would suspect for a number of organizations, they're going to look at this as an experiment, and if they can save some money and at the end of the day, they might look to do that.
And some people might be looking to save money. A lot of things were canceled. And as social workers, many of us work for nonprofits, and they are going to be severely impacted by this, especially with the cancellation of many fundraisers that were raising money for these nonprofits, for the clientele that they serve. And how can nonprofits communicate the need to donate, especially when so many individuals right now are losing their jobs and the economy is not in the best place?
So there's two things I'll address here. So I'll address first about what you can do for fundraising. There's lots of different tools right now you can implement and utilize for online fundraising through crowdfunding and things of that sort, and really communicate the importance of your organization's mission. And during these uncertain times right now, the importance of the work, especially as a social worker, what you're doing on the ground. And so the more you're able to tell that message and tell your friends and tell your family and tell other folks that are willing to give, whether it's 5, 10, so on and so forth, do as much as you can within reason. I think right now, folks are looking more to support organizations that have a mission that directly correlate to supporting each other, and social workers are right then and there. The second part that I want to address too is because of that economic impact. My particular fear is that right now, if people are not patronizing these different establishments, whether you're a retailer or you're a hospitality-based business such as a bar or restaurant, a lot of counties rely on sales tax revenue. And so if you see a decline in that, and especially on the state side too, and where we are, the next funding round, whether you're relying on a county budget, if you're relying on the state budget, wherever you are, or for federal funding, these are things that you need to keep an eye out for because of what this will look like. Now, we are at the end of the first quarter. We won't really see a sustained impact until really the middle of the second quarter when we have some economic data, but these are numbers to pay attention to, especially if you are in a development or a financial operations role for a nonprofit, because if you're looking at grant money on the public side next year, and even on the private side, if there's financial institutions that may give. These are all factors that you need to look at in the coming months, because undoubtedly there will be a seismic impact to what's happening right now, not just in terms of the quality of life and how we're operating all together, but what does that look like in terms of like the quote unquote comet tail effect of what's happening right now.
It is an interesting time, and one thing as social workers, we always talk about self-care and the importance of self-care. And so many times in the news these past few weeks, and even still today, if you're sick, stay home. And that's something that a lot of people, I think, are struggling with, that balance of we're so used to going in and just toughing it out and not really doing that self-care piece. Even from a young age, I was saying that my daughter is in second grade, and the past few years, she's strived to get that perfect attendance certificate at school. It's something that is, even from a young age, it's, be at school, come show up, even if, and sort of tough it out. And it's reversing that. It's sort of taking that time to say self-care in this sense. If you are sick, stay home. And how does that even work in your professional world? In social work, it's sort of something we talk about a lot, even though sometimes we don't always do it. But in your world, it's more government and businesses where it's harder to take off, especially if you're working in small businesses where they need you there. How does this translate, and what does that impact?
Well, I would say that, I would consider communicators to be on the front lines. We are not first responders like a police officer or a firefighter or an EMT or somebody who works for a Department of Health, but we are on the front lines because we need to be able to communicate to the public various points of information to allay fears and make sure that and mitigate these fears and really discuss the evolving risk of a situation. And it's something where, like, our office here in Albany and even our partners out in Las Vegas, we've been busy around the clock because of the varying organizations that we deal with and the impact to their organizations. And right now, it's our responsibility as communicators to find out what's happening from local and state and federal authority and conveying that to our clients. So therefore, we can prepare a reasonable response to what's happening right now based upon that organization's risk at that time. As I mentioned just a few moments ago, it's evolving risk. The risk that we assess today may be different than tomorrow or a week from now. It's evolving. And I think one of the biggest things that we see is, as the situation evolves and changes, decision makers at all different levels make decisions based upon the risk in that moment. And it's important to note that these are all evolving things. We're all finding out a lot of information together, and we need to have some patience. I think that's one of the bigger things. We need to have patience for a situation before we jump to conclusion, just because there's a lot of information, some properly vetted, some not so properly vetted, and you want to make sure that you're looking at the totality of a picture before you make a decision about whether or not this information is valid or not. And I think that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we're in a peak panic mode, because there's so much information, some that is alarmist, some that is dismissive, and you have to find the right balance of what is the right information to assess your own personal risk and the risk for your organization. So as it relates to self-care, it's something that, we're in this situation where it's all hands on deck. And I know from a lot of other folks in communications for other organizations, both public and private, this is one of these times where when you're learning through different crisis scenarios, and even when you've had crisis for your organization, this is, what you've always had been training for in terms of being able to properly provide the counsel and the advisement to navigate your organization forward, even in this macro crisis situation that we're facing right now.
I want to thank you so much for coming on, because this has been an overwhelming time, I think, for everyone, whether you're highly anxious about it, fearful, whatever the emotional range is that you're dealing, it's still overwhelming with all of the news sources, coming at us, like you said, with some information is more factual, some is more opinion-based and rumor-based, and then we're getting all of these emails from brands and agencies. So having you break it down today has been very helpful. Again, we were with Joe Bonilla, who is the managing partner and senior media director and the co-founder of Relentless, and he specializes in crisis communication and helping individuals and brands and organizations be able to get their message out there. And I want to thank you for breaking it down for us today.
Yeah, well, again, it's a pleasure to be on with you, Alyssa. And again, this is something where this take account of your own risk for your organization and for yourself.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to The Social Workers on WCDB Albany.